Willie the Lion Smith was another one of those people that you can only call unique. And he was, of course, one of the great stride pianists, James P. And, he was a big favorite of and influence on Duke Ellington. And Willie was a character, definitely. And he was in character. He had a bowler hat and he had a cigar which never left his mouth. Just a little while ago, less than a week ago, I happened on YouTube, you suddenly hit things on YouTube that you were not looking for. And you see there was a show in the excellent British series that's hosted by Humphrey Littleton, and they had Willie on, and it was great to see him because it really captures him. He's talking, and he is obviously, there's a big audience and he's aware of them, and it's a really sweet capture of Willie, the way he was. He was a showman. Eddie Condon loved Willie, used him a lot on the town hall concerts. He was a resident in the village at a place called the Pied Piper, where he had a band, and James P. was the intermission pianist. That was a little before my coming to New York, but I would love to bring that back in the time machine. Willie, I got to know basically when he was playing in a place that still exists physically in the village called the Riviera. It had a back room. It was an Italian restaurant. It had a back room with a piano, and Art Hodes played there. I think Art started the jazz thing there. Then Willie was there for quite a while. And people would sit in, and Willie was also a raconteur, and he knew perfect Yiddish. He had his calling card in Hebrew letters, had the Hebrew cantor, it said in Hebrew letters. His full name includes Berthelov, which is a Russian, not necessarily Jewish, but in his case, yes. And where he got to speak, he could speak fluent Yiddish because my friend Nat Lorber, whom I've talked about, who grew up speaking Yiddish, he would converse with Willie, and he said Willie was, Willie had, I wish he had recorded this, he had his own Yiddish lyrics to I Found a New Baby. I remember, ich habe neue Fegele. I wish I could remember the whole thing, but he liked to sing, and he had a pretty high voice, and it was sort of sing-songy, but he really liked to sing. He was, in the best sense of the word, he was an entertainer as well, which comes out in that TV thing. I mean, he's wearing a, and the cigar never leaves his mouth in that show. For half an hour, the cigar lives there. It is dead, of course, but he's just chewing on it. He sings with the cigar in his mouth, and I've seen him do that. Willie was Willie the Lion, and musically, he was the most wonderful, lovely composer. Those little piano pieces that he wrote are just so special and unlike anything else in jazz. They have a little of a ragtime flavor, but they're really him, and it's strange because his personality wasn't that way, but they're really romantic. They're very special. I wish that, Wells stood to play some of them. I wish somebody would sit down and, but it would have to be somebody. I can't think of, Mike Lipskin studied with the Lion, But those things are hard to play, they're very special. It is like a jazz Chopin or something, or Debussy. More like Debussy. Yeah. It's impressionistic. Duke took from him, and in one instance actually stole from him. There's a piece, a remarkable Ellington piece, which was the intro, was the theme of a program on WBAI initiated by Nat Hentoff and Martin Williams called The Sound of Jazz, and that starts with the Ellington thing, and it's called The Clothed Woman. And it's just Duke and the Rhythm. So, well, no, it's not. There is a little bit of horn back play with a small horn section, but it's basically a piano piece, starting out with Duke alone, out of tempo, and then it goes into time, and what he plays there is stolen from Willie. It's he plays it like Willie, plays all the way, but it's not credited. It's not credited, and I don't know really how he got away with it, because Willie was still alive when that came out. It's in '78, you know, I mean, but they were friends, so I guess, but you know, I mean, it's the most outright piece of musical theft. I know. It's really, he plays it through, you know, I mean.
Well, Ellington,
it's not just the quote, I mean, he plays the
thing. Ellington had also written Portrait of
the Lion
in 1939,
yeah.
And a second one in 1965, I think, which he plays at that Pittsburgh Piano Festival.
Well, there's no, and he always spoke very highly of Willie, and I've seen them together. I saw them together, I think, at Columbia. It did something. It may have been recorded. I was lucky to be at some of Duke's solo piano recitals, you know, which is special. But in this case, it's really, I mean, it may be on you. Everything is on YouTube. It's called The Clothed Woman. And it's a fascinating piece of Ellingtonia because of the way it starts. This Willie segment is bookended by this very abstract piano thing, which it starts it and ends it. It's very special in the Ellington literature, but it's the Lion. And the Lion, of course, is interesting, you know, Artie Shaw in his The Trouble with Cinderella, he talks about how important Willie was to him. We went to Harlem and played with him, and Willie apparently had some impact on his temporary, or maybe not so temporary, confusion about things. Willie was really fun to hang out with, and I used to see him quite a bit at the Central Plaza, that downtown scene that I've talked about. And there he was mostly put in a position of playing in ad hoc bands of a traditional nature. And that wasn't really, I mean, he could certainly do it, had no trouble with it, but it was really not his main thing. He was really at his best as a soloist, and that's how Eddie Condon made use of him a lot on the town hall concerts. Eddie was a great fan of Willie's, and Willie was, if you were, you know, standing at the bar with him and asked him what he wanted, he'd say, "Brandy." That's what Willie drank, brandy. Yeah, but again, you know, he recorded for Commodore, he recorded the piano things of his own, and there are two they're years apart. There are two. The second one, which was actually done in the LP era, is not nearly as good as the first one, which is on 78s, and which eventually, I think, got reissued in LP form. So there was a bit of a decline there. There's also, you know, the pieces are pretty challenging pianistically. There's one he wrote called "Here Comes the Band," I think, and "Fingerbuster is Jelly." Willie, in a blindfold test, you know, Leonard Feather did this blindfold test thing. It started out in metronome and then went to downbeat. And what it is playing records for musicians without identifying them. So in part, it's what they can guess, but once they're told what it is, which Leonard would tell them, if they didn't guess what it was, he would tell them. And it's full of opinions. And that's the most interesting part of it, what people say. And Willie is scathing about, Leonard plays him some traditional jazz thing, and he says, these people, he's talking about New Orleans musicians, and he's not talking black and white. He said they didn't know how to dress, they didn't know how to talk, they didn't know how to play music. He just a scathing thing about it. There is a biography done with my dear friend George Hafer, who was a committed researcher, did a lot of great work in jazz research, wrote a collector's column way back for a downbeat called The Hot Box, in which there is a lot of interesting information, some of which has been lost in the mainstream of jazz history, but it's there. You know? So the biography is interesting.